Which one am I sharing? Good. I'm sharing the one that doesn't have all the all, all my secret content visible that I haven't shut down yet. Right. Okay. So this week we are working through chapter 22 of the outstanding user interfaces with Shiny book that we've been working through for like the past 5 months, I guess. And this is the first chapter of a new kind of case study section of the book that relates to mobile development using Shiny. And there is a package that's discussed throughout this section of the book called Shiny Mobile. And the aim of this section of the book seems to be to kind of replicate a lot of the functionality of Shiny Mobile anew. So, you know, if you're doing this with production code, you probably just want to use Shiny Mobile. But the purpose of this is to work out how to use frameworks that are designed for mobile development, how to use them within an R package that can support Shiny development. The Shiny Mobile package uses something called Framework 7, which is a tool for like kind of, I think it's kind of platform agnostic, but it's used for mobile development. Yeah, this chapter's quite short, but covers some kind of conceptual stuff that I wasn't actually aware, with which I have had well, I don't do mobile development, but I didn't know what a progressive web app was until I actually read this chapter. I had in my mind that it was like a kind of, I had in my mind, based on the name, that it was something where you as a user are kind of led through an application, by like a kind of, like a kind of breadcrumb trail of like you start on page 1 and then you fill in your content and then the app moves you to page 2. It's absolutely not what it's about. So we'll talk about progressive web apps in a little bit of detail. I haven't added any notes for this chapter to the kind of book club notes that we've been building up, because I only really read the chapter last night, and also I don't think we're using the book club notes as much as we have done in previous book clubs, so I'm not overly concerned about its content not being filled in, really. Anyway, so there's a couple of parts of the book following this one. There's one on kind of, I think it's on React development using Shiny. And various other bits of kind of tooling that you can use if you want to use more kind of advanced JavaScript stuff. And then the very final part is that right? Shiny modern web development. Or maybe it's just one more part after this. Anyway, there's the stuff on React and the stuff on kind of tooling related to modern web development. This part is about mobile web development, which isn't the same thing as writing a web app that is hosted in a browser, which your users can interact with in a browser on their mobile device. This is more about making a kind of standalone app that can be, that's similar to like, a Spotify app or an Amazon app or something that looks like it's a program sitting on their mobile device that they can, click on and it will open, and it won't look like it's sitting in a browser. So this is quite different from typical Shiny development, because everything I've written in Shiny, the purpose of it was for it to be running in a browser. Occasionally you might have some kind of, like dev tool type things, similar to like the now what is it? There's a test that snapshot comparison app. So if you've got, the output from one test looks like this, and the output from the expected output looks like this, a little web app comes out that's, hosted within RStudio, but still effectively running in a browser that with which you can compare things. But so most of the Shiny stuff that I've done has been to run on my own desktop as little apps that run inside RStudio, or that have been hosted on something like shinyapps.io or RStudio Connect or something, and which are to be ran from in a browser, typically on a desktop. Now, there are subtleties to development of web pages themselves to make them easily used on a mobile. But the stuff we're going to be talking about today is more related to kind of making your apps look like a kind of standalone thing that the user can use as if they were an Android app, as if they were a iPhone app. So yeah, so the things we've been talking about up to now in the book, Bootstrap 4, the Bulma package that we were talking about in the last chapter. So these are like HTML templates for designing web pages that Shiny has taken advantage of because it generates apps that run in web pages. Framework 7's been mentioned a few times in the book, but not in much depth, really. So of the frameworks that we've talked about, most of them are for desktop usage. Some of them do work okay on mobile platforms. So like, if your app is running in the browser, a lot of these, a lot of the frameworks we've talked about will, adapt to the size of the screen and things like that. So they work quite well in the browser on a mobile device. But yeah, this is a little snapshot of a Twitter app that is kind of native to a mobile device and what it looks like. So you don't get the kind of, the browser window. You don't get the additional real estate taken up by the browser in which it's embedded. And yes, it makes for a nicer experience. when working on not working, when using a mobile app, if they can look like. Sorry about that. I lost my connection. Yeah. So one of the important things that is raised in this chapter is the ability. Um, if if you've got a web page running in the browser, and like some web app or something like that that runs in the browser, and you you are disconnected from the network, or you close your browser window. Well, no, maybe that's not a good idea. A good example. You can, for a lot of apps, you'll lose everything you've done to that point. Whereas for a mobile app, one of the kind of obligations is that they should, whatever state you were at, if when you lost network connectivity, and try their hardest to get you back to the same state when you reconnect to the network. So in many ways, that was, in many ways, it's still calling me info trading. In many ways, what just happened is a good way to demonstrate what we're talking about in this chat. Right. So we're going to talk about Shiny Mobile, and hopefully I'll be able to open that without Gremlins disconnecting me again. Okay, yeah, I've got it now. Yes, so this package here, we can actually open it and see more user-friendly stuff. But this provides a way to make Shiny apps that would be appropriate for iOS and Android, and that can also work on the desktop. It's built upon Framework 7, which until we worked through this book, I hadn't even heard of. But yeah, I mean, it's quite neat. So, for example, you can build apps that look like this on the appropriate phone. So, for example, so you can see that like there's rather than having the browser window around the side of them, you've got kind of places that you can click that would otherwise be in would probably be more appropriate in the header bar of a browser-driven app, and things that basically just look more appropriate for a mobile device. So Framework 7, funky graphics and whatnot, but it is, yeah, I mean, it's a way to create apps that look native to a few different settings. Okay, did I lose the book though? Okay, so mobile development. Now, mobile development itself, I mean, there are other players, but mainly you've got Android and iPhone. So you've got the iOS for iPhones, you've got the Android, the the what is it now? The Linux system that Android's built upon. I can't remember exactly what it is, whether it's even Android OS or something like that. These two things, right? If you're making an app that's native to one of those two types of device, you you have quite a restricted choice of languages that you can use for for iPhone development, iPad development. You might need to use Objective-C or Swift. For Android development, you might need to use Java. And that's fine if you're fluent in one of those languages. You can readily make an Android app if you're fluent in Java. You can readily make an iPhone app if you're fluent with Swift. But if you want to make an app like, I spend an unfeasible amount of time on chess.com, despite not being a particularly good chess player. They have an app that I use on my mobile, which, if it was a native app, it would be written in Java. Because of my Android phone. For it to look the same on an iPhone, sorry, for it to function the same on an iPhone, and there'll definitely be an iPhone version of the same thing, they'd need to maintain a Java code base and a Swift code base or an Objective-C code base. I don't actually know anything about the back, how that thing is developed. But there will be apps where, people are maintaining an Android specific code base and an iPhone specific code base, an iOS specific code base. Yeah, so there's technological issues there. What you'd really like to be able to do is develop in one common language that's already well known throughout the world of development, which would allow you to develop for the two operating systems simultaneously. So you could maintain a single code base with which you can generate apps that can target both iOS and Android. There are other things that you need to be aware of in terms of mobile development. So apps, yes, installation. There are app stores from which you install things that then run on your device, and yeah, you'd need to be able to get, if you want to target mobile devices with a Shiny app, you might be obliged to develop something that could be installed from one of those kind of app stores, like sort of Google Play and things like that. Another thing is that, like I was saying earlier on, the apps should have an offline mode and should be able to kind of recover from intermittent network loss or, low bandwidth coverage and things. Yes. The main thing highlighted here is that you need to know multiple languages and maintain multiple code bases if you want to build a native app for those two systems. Yes, so we already know how to make web applications for use in a browser. The browser doesn't give us a particularly good experience on a mobile device where the screen's already relatively small and so you want something that's more appropriate for a mobile device than a browser app, and you want something that's less burdensome to maintain than a natively written app for two different operating systems. And the thing that we're going to learn about in this part of the book are things called progressive web apps. So let's take us to the web dev thing. There's also a if I just open another window, there was a good thing I found yesterday on Mozilla. Yeah. Yes. So there's the book provides a link to this document that explains the difference between like a progressive web application and things that are native to the mobile system or things that are browser bound. Right, okay, we'll talk about those things in a little bit. Right. Yes, so there's that thing at web.dev, and there's also a description and a few articles at the MDN web docs. And basically what a progressive web app is, it's an app that you basically develop in like a language like JavaScript, possibly TypeScript or something similar, that that runs on the mobile device. So there's like some kind of interpretive layer between the code that you write and the language that would be native for the mobile device that something is hosted upon. It basically, you want it to be a kind of as slim as possible so that it, no, I'll explain that in a bit. Right, so progressive web apps. So it improves upon the classic web apps. So you're able to have full screen display. You can install these things from app stores and things. And when the app loads on your device, you get like a loading screen to displayed. They and they may you want them to have a kind of a user interface that's consistent with the device on which you're working. So a device, an Apple device, has a particular look and feel which you want to replicate in your app. The document here gives three pillars of progressive web apps: that they're capable, that they're reliable, and that they're installable. So what does that mean? That means capable is like, they know how to interact with the file system on the device upon which they're hosted. So, if your app needed to, oh, right, okay. If your app I don't know, if you wanted to draw in photos from someone's mobile device into your app, your the way that you write the app the frameworks upon which you write would make it possible to do that. So they need to be able to access things like media on your device, the file system and stuff like that. They need to be reliable, and reliability for mobile devices is slightly different than for desktops or even laptops, because network accessibility, it can drop in and out much more kind of frequently on a mobile device, because people are moving around, and because I think you probably understand. So these kind of apps, they need a way to work when they're offline, and I don't know quite what they mean by transparent failures, but like if your app can't do something because the memory or the bandwidth or something on the machine that you're working on can't support it, you should make it as clear as possible to the user that what they're attempting to do can't be done on their machine at the current time. And also okay, Arthur's back. Really, I've only covered about 2 more sentences since you left, Arthur. Right. Anyway, being installable, and installable is another thing. So, like, how do you ensure that these can open and launch from the home screen? Right. So, for us, yeah. So, installable. So, yeah, these things, right? So, what are we talking about here? The app must be served over HTTPS. For us, what does that mean in this section about installation? Does that mean that the code that a user would install on their machine is served over HTTPS, or does it mean that once installed, that app will make its fetch and whatnot queries across HTTPS? I think it means the former. In order to be installable, you need to define a kind of manifest file that allows it to be installed on an Apple or an Android device. Within that, you need like a bit of metadata to cover things like the name of the app, any kind of icons that you need, an icon that might sit on the user's home screen, and any kind of graphics that need to be displayed when the app is starting up. And a service worker. So a service worker would be something that runs on the mobile device and maintains a cache of data that reflects the state of the app while the user is working with it, and some potentially historical data as well. the purpose of that cache is to ensure that the user can continue using it while the mobile is offline, and all those kind of criteria, which I have never fulfilled for anything I've ever worked with before. Yeah, you should get a kind of a prompt on the device that allows that program to be installed. Yeah, so how to develop a PWA. Right, so the aim here is to make it as easy as possible to develop one of these apps, and as easy as possible for people to install those apps on the many varied devices that are out there in the world. So we can do that. So what we're going to be doing, Framework 7 is like a JavaScript framework designed to create these kind of progressive web apps. And we're going to, and Shiny Mobile was built on that. What that means is, because Framework 7 is a JavaScript framework, it means that we can write JavaScript code that will run on the user's device, and which will be kind of device independent in some ways. So, you know, it reduces the amount of friction that you'd have when porting from Android to iOS. Yeah, so there's a few helper things and whatnot to ensure that you can build one of these things. So, right now, the kinds of things that you would what would you need to implement? What are the kind of front end things that relate to the stuff that we've been talking about in the book so far, that maybe we wouldn't yet be able to implement? So, I mean, we did a case study where we hooked there's a Bootstrap 4 template called, what was it? It was called Tabler. And that gave us a way to add a variety of different user interface tooling to a Shiny app. But we were writing the code, so, you know, the ultimate aim of that was to build for the browser. There are I'm trying to think what would be a good example of something that you wouldn't typically have in a browser version of a of an app. So yeah, but there are user interface widgets that are more appropriate in a mobile setting than in a browser setting. So, for example, like these things where you basically got a list of things to go through, and how would it work? It's hard to do. It's hard to do this stuff on a desktop when it's like written for a mobile. So, like, you know, you could imagine thumbing through a bunch of slides on a mobile in a way that would probably you'd probably want to click on some arrows to navigate through these things if you were writing it for a browser perspective. Um, yeah, Framework 7. Da, 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 da. Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, I haven't done this sort of stuff before. I haven't developed Android apps or anything, independently of the our work that we do. Um, and precisely what the the dev tools actually look like, I'm not really sure, to be honest. I mean, I've seen things like, like um, if I go into Lighthouse, we can how can we do this? What can I just want to demonstrate what something would look like in a mobile. Is that possible? Yeah. So this is just a way of kind of mocking what a browser app would look like on a mobile screen. There's probably better tools, but I don't know them off the top of my head. Um, oh, is it? Hold on. I'm sure there was a way of viewing it. Oh, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Um, so, you know, if you want to develop, you'll be developing on a desktop, on a laptop or something. You then want to be able to view what the app you're developing looks like as, you know, in a kind of mobile mimicry setting. So there must be some tools that we can use that will run our apps as if they are on a mobile device, even though we're just looking at them on the screen. God, I'm getting phoned by someone. Um, um, yeah. So I mean, this is all like completely new ground for me. Um, how you uh, the the typical elements that go into a web app, into a mobile app, the way that you debug problems with those apps, the way that you like interact with it during development, and how you create a kind of staged version of that app that you can then have a look at on your own phone, how you get these things onto an app store so that others can download them. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's quite interesting. Whether Shiny is, I mean, it's interesting because, there will be apps that you develop in Shiny that may benefit from this. I haven't had one in that I've needed to do in the past, but I don't know what your thoughts are really. But it sounds a very interesting section of the book. The next chapter that we're going to be looking at is reconstructing the Shiny mobile package. So with that, we'll be using Framework 7. We'll be using Charpente to fill in the kind of, the skeleton for making widgets and linking them to and filling in what the input and output bindings and stuff should look like. And then hopefully, do we see any Shiny in the next chapter? I don't know whether we Yeah. Assuming we must at some point, but right, yeah. Anyway, but that's sorry. I know I've talked for ages about like a relatively extremely short chapter, but it is completely foreign stuff to me. If either of you have any experience with like mobile development, I'd be quite interested to hear.
Zero experience, Russ, and I think I probably had an even less clear idea of what progressive web application was than you did. So this is kind of interesting. I'll be really interested to see, you know, if with Shiny Mobile and Framework 7, like the degree to which Shiny apps can be used in offline in any meaningful way,
Yeah, yeah,
because and because it, you know, without the R engine powering, I mean, you know, to the extent that Shiny basically just writes JavaScript for us, then I guess it could work. But to the extent R needs to do something,
mm,
yeah,
yeah,
I'll be
yeah,
interested. I mean, I guess maybe in future, in some probably not too distant future, maybe the
yeah,
PositConf will be that future where it'll be revealed of, like, you know, was it WebAssembly? I guess might allow one to do something like that, I guess, based on my very
yeah,
tenuous
yeah.
understanding of what WebAssembly
But
is and does.
even at this stage, like if you have a like an interactive plot or something like that, a plotly thing, once the data for that is on your device, you can interact with it, you can zoom in and out and things like that, and um there are meaningful things you can do to interact with an app, and you know, but potentially you could cache the data for those kind of things and come back to it. But yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying though. Like the bulk of Shiny's workload goes on the server. So um how we can be robust to like network problems and things like that. Um, Presumably you just have to indicate that I can't do anything reactive right now because I simply can't speak to the server. Um, yeah. Anyway, I
Or
think it'd be
like, I guess if it's like a matter of like caching the data, I guess maybe if you're caching more stuff on the device, then you could, if it's just a matter of serving up data, then yeah, or rendering the data with some kind of widget that's basically JavaScript based, yeah. But again, like if you're filtering a data set or anything touching on R, I just don't see how it could happen. Yeah.
yeah. Cool. Brilliant. Yeah, so so how does this work? Framework 7, it provides it it provides an API. You write JavaScript to hit that API. Or, you know, if you know React or Vue or something like that, you can presumably we're then writing Shiny code at one level. We're writing a wrapper from Shiny to um, JavaScript that will talk to the Framework 7 um, framework. And then Framework 7 is talking to potentially Android, potentially iOS, potentially a browser if ran in a desktop setting. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe when it says a desktop setting, it's referring more to things like Electron as a way of deploying a kind of native looking app for a desktop. So I was thinking that maybe it was like you'd use the app on the browser in the desktop, but presumably you could alternatively make something that's installable, which would look more native to it. Anyway, I will see you all next week, and we will discuss some more practical things about how to do this kind of thing. Yeah, I'm quite looking forward to this section, to be honest. I think it'll be quite interesting compared, to because it's quite a new avenue for me as far as Shiny development's concerned. Anyway, everybody, I shall see you all next week.
See you next week, Russ.